Good evening. This is Victoria with Women's Issues, Women's Voices, and you are listening to 89.5 FM. It's not just community radio. No, it's not just radio. It is community radio. This is KOPN Columbia. And this is, as I said, Women's Issues, Women's Voices. And tonight I am very excited to have Kaitlin Shetler of Kaitlin Shetler Poetry in my Zoom studio.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Kaitlin.
Hi.
So you are Zooming in from Nashville.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So the story is, folks, that my dear friend Anne Marie, who I've talked about before on this show, posted this poem called Thunder Thighs. And I was so struck by it. I have now misquoted it many times, dozens and dozens of times over this last month. I was like, who wrote this? This is so brilliant. And then I was excited because there you had your Kaitlin Shetler Poetry on Facebook.
Yes.
And it's Shetler, Shetler.
Yes.
Right, Kaitlin with an I, K-A-I-T-L-I-N.
Yes.
And I just love you. You're just so open because you're like, I'm here, I'm ranting.
Yes.
You might like it, you might not. Oh, I forgot to ask you when we were preparing. I wanted to ask you about the Tom Hanks thing. We'll get to that.
Could talk for a while.
But that's beside the point. Whether you call yourself or that, like, you're a feminist poet. You are a powerhouse. It's just like, and you say it, like, some of it's really great, some of it's just you being you, and maybe it's not something I want to repeat, but still, all of it makes me think. Like,
It's
some
raw.
of it's raw. It's raw. Yeah. So what else do you want the listeners to know before you read us this poem, Thunder Thighs?
Thunder Thighs. Well, yes, I am in Nashville. I am a social worker at heart. That is what I spend my day job, I guess, doing when my night job is probably ranting on social media and writing poems about it.
Yeah.
And I'm just incredibly lucky to be having this conversation with you. And I never would have thought, 3-4 years back when I was just writing, baby Kaitlin, just writing on everything, everything that I thought and felt.
Yeah.
I never thought that it would, I would find people who felt the same way. So really this journey has been I'm very humbled to be on it. So
well, I think you're going to find, because when I mentioned, because listeners, if you, and I don't remember, a few weeks ago, I did a show where I actually read Thunder Thighs as part of the show. I had so many women say, you're going to have Kaitlin Shetler on your show? Right? So you have a fan club in Columbia, Missouri.
Well,
yeah. So, you've already got this nugget here. Yeah. So do you want to start out reading this poem? And I will try not to make any.
No, definitely. I would love to read this to you. So this is called Thunder Thighs. I was 10 when I first heard the term thunder thighs, and I wondered how to become the type of woman strong enough to hold thunder in her very legs. The type of woman loud enough to make thunder when she walks, a storm bringer drowning out the words that call attention to thighs and not souls, that call attention to guys and enable trolls. I wondered how to get legs of thunder in a I could get a tongue of lightning to go alongside, if I could really shake institutions with each step I took and make a reputation from all the foundations I shook, my body rapidly expanding to take up the space I was told I could never have, clapping thunder into the atmosphere in the faces of those hell-bent on my silence and fear. Hear me and my thighs. They are more powerful than the men who name them. They are more beautiful than the world that hides them. And I was 10 when I first heard how women are hated, how their bodies berated and their ideas negated. And I was 11 when men first made me wary, and 13 when they taught me that storms were too scary. But I'm now 30 plus 4. And my thighs keep growing, asking for more. They're clapping and shaking and making a scene, bringing a storm and washing things clean.
Oh, I have to tell you that I enjoyed even more seeing you read it. Like, you just have this great combination of like joy and anger and empowerment and sadness. I'm like, wow, you really touched me.
Thank you so much.
And that's so what I wanted to ask you about was poems for the resistance.
Yes.
I mean, I feel like that is like allowing people to have all those emotions and it being in a way that is still safe, right? Like that's the resistance. It's like, it's that shaking the foundation, right? But also you like you have a smile on your face, right? You know, it's like you're enjoying this. Like this is, change.
Well, I mean,
Not all serious and.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think at its heart, the act of resistance, right, is like this very joyful thing. People don't want it to be. I don't, and honestly, the reasons that we have to resist, right, are not joyful at all. They're traumatic, they're oppressive, they are they're divisive. I think the fact that we have to resist what it is that we're resisting is not something to be joyful about. And so like this ability though to do it, this ability to look at something that is either oppressive or something that's traumatic, to look at something that really wants you to just comply with whatever is going on, to be okay with the hurt or be okay with the division. The fact that you can do that in the littlest of ways. I mean, I say poems for the resistance because like they're poems. They're like they're words. And I think you feel like just writing them. I know when I first started out, it was like, okay, I feel helpless. I don't know what to do. I'm just gonna write. But then the act of writing, the act of putting out words, of crafting a poem or making an angry Facebook post at 4 a.m. in the morning because like you just have nothing else to say, that resistance act is so it is so powerful and it is so joyful. And I think that you can hold those together. I mean, I get a lot when I started writing poems for the resistance. It was about 4 or 5 years ago. A lot of it came out of the election and what was going on with the transition from one president to the situation that we found ourselves in. And there was a lot of anger that I did not know how to deal with because I didn't know as a woman, as somebody who had been told all of her life, like how nice I was and polite and like such a good person and a good friend. And I had like this rage, you know, bubbling within me, and I didn't know where to let it out. And I didn't know how to let it out. I had a voice, but I didn't know how to use it really. And I didn't know what was going on. And so it was like, oh, I'm just gonna write a poem. And I remember like my first poem for the resistance was like this little thing. I don't even have it memorized. I'd have to go back and look at it on Facebook, but it was like this little thing about being a bee, like basically like a bee, like a bee, yeah, like a bee, like having people who think that like all I'm doing, or I think it was like having people call me a mosquito because all I did was like itch, 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 or people wanting me to be a butterfly, just beautiful. But I was like neither of those things. I was like a bee. Like I could sting, but make honey. Like I could bring life. Like it was this kind of thing that I thought of. It's this resistance, right? And so I put that out there and I said poems for the resistance. And then I was like, everything that I'm doing right now is like this act of resisting what it is that people are telling me I have to believe or be or think or do. For people who don't know me, like my history and background is really deeply involved in like this evangelical culture. I was a church girl. I grew up in the church. I was the perfect church girl. I had the Bibles, I had, everything, and I was told to be a certain way. And when I started pushing up against that, people started responding and I started resisting. So
well, there's a reason that our children say no first,
right,
because in order to be able to learn what you want, you have to make space, a psychological, physical space where you say no, just so you have some room in there to actually make your choices. Yeah. Right. And that's where I think what happens is like, maybe if I had met you 4 or 5 years ago, right, I would see somebody who was like still trying to figure out how to use your voice, how to transform, because as a somatic mental health worker, like I tell people that there's the anger that we have that takes us into the fight mode. Our nervous system, like, right? And then there's the anger in which we're still like able to soothe ourselves, where it's like an anger that is transformative, it's empowering, right? And that I feel like that what happens, that what I don't see in your poetry, what I don't see in you, it's like you are able to really share this while like I'm feeling your anger, while I'm also feeling your solidity, like your stability. And that's really powerful for me. Really powerful for me. Yeah.
I was thinking about that because when I started, 4 or 5 years ago, really trying to put words, I guess, to all of these feelings that I started to have and all of this changing worldview that I was having. And it didn't matter. I found that it didn't matter what words I used, because the people that I was saying these words to, the audience receiving them, just said that they were bitter. Like that's you being bitter. That's you being angry. Like there was no acknowledgement of the different types of anger. There's no acknowledgement within the faith background that I come from. There's no acknowledgement that anger is anything but kind of this rebellion, I think, against God. And so I would always have people tell me, like, you really need to get a hold of yourself. Why are you so angry? Hopefully you can find it. This is what I heard a lot, and still hear sometimes from people. Oh, hopefully you can find your peace. Hopefully you can find your peace and heal and not be angry anymore. And I think about that because I have become such a good friend with my anger in the past 5 years. Like, I know her very well and we feel very comfortable together. And I'm like, I reject that. Like, I do not think that you have to be healed. You don't have to be angry anymore. That you can't express your anger in certain ways. And so you'll see, like, in my poems, I had somebody make a comment probably a week or so ago that said, well, hopefully you'll figure out what you believe soon, because if you can start healing, it will change your art for the better. Your poems won't sound so angry. You really will you'll grow, you'll become more beautiful. Like, the stuff that you write will be a lot more beautiful than what you're writing now. And I mean, I make it people can say whatever they say to me. Like, that's your opinion, fine. But I really have a hard time with that that belief that a woman especially can not access, like, to be healthy has to push away half of these thoughts and feelings and beliefs to be healthy, or to make beautiful art, or to say, or that somebody's journey is like for your pleasure, right? To say that, like, well, hopefully you'll get to this place where you'll heal because you'll start to write poetry that I want to read.
Well, that's where I was just going to go with that, is that it's this. So this is a person who actively seeks out your poetry.
Yes.
And then doesn't, and finds the poetry unsettling in some way, right? And instead of slowing down and going, oh, I feel unsettled about this, right? So maybe Kaitlin isn't the poet I should be reading, right? Maybe there's somebody else out there. I mean, but I'm sure that even Mary Oliver, some people find her work, like, I find it very beautiful, but I'm sure there's some people that are just like, not Mary Oliver, right? But the fact that this person seeks it out, and then seeks it out so that they can share with you that they find it upsetting and that you need to change, right? There's something in that that's like, that person does not get your work.
No.
Like,
I have also.
I have to tell you, go back to the poem that you just read to us. Like, I personally connect with this. I mean, the beauty of saying, right, if there's a listener out there that's 13, that's being told, right? And this is the thing, at 13, we, our people around us are trying to help us learn how to be, like, socially, right, successful and appropriate, and there's a way to do that where we can still listen to what that 13-year-old's saying. We don't have to shut it down, right? But it's that thing of like, oh, but the storm that happens in 13-year-old girls, like the hormones, the stuff that's happening,
Mhm.
can make the adults in her life very uncomfortable, right? Yeah. And I personally am inspired by a world where more adults are learning how to sit with their discomfort, right? And that doesn't mean no boundaries,
Yeah.
right? But be able to sit with their discomfort and hear it, and still also, right, create the vessel, right, to help, because 13-year-olds don't have the brain development of 30-year-olds, right? That's just developmentally, right?
Right.
But to me, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I write what I would have wanted to hear
Mm,
at 13.
yeah.
And I would have wanted somebody to tell me this instead of me worrying about, how my clothes fit or what people were thinking of me when I went into certain social situations. I- there there was not a love of body. um and and
Mm, yeah.
I talk to a lot of women though who share that experience,
Mhm.
and I think, we talk about having good self-esteem, but the system social worker in me wants to take that burden sometimes off of
Mm,
girls and
mm,
teens and kids and say, you know what, it's not about improving their self-esteem, it's about creating a society where they are beautiful because they are they, like,
right. Yeah.
because of them, like it
Right.
doesn't. But I do think hearing this is
Mhm.
what I would have wanted. I would have wanted somebody to say this to me, that
Yeah.
you are the fact that you are a system that can walk around and think and
Mhm.
feel and love and interact with the world, like that is beautiful. Like,
Yeah.
no matter
Well,
what, no matter how you present in your body, that is a beautiful thing.
so Kaitlin, I think this is a great place for us to read the poem that you're going to take us out of this first half. And so, folks, if you're just joining, this is Victoria from Women's Issues, Women's Voices. You are listening to 89.5 KOPN Columbia. And I am in my Zoom studio with Kaitlin Shetler of Kaitlin Shetler Poetry. And she is going to go out of the second half with another one of her poems
Yeah.
that I've lost. Take it away.
Okay. Yes, this poem is called Clever.
Mm,
There are many tongues that bring men fear, those of fire and snakes and swords, but none quite like the tongues of women called to preach a holy word. When God is silent, the rocks cry out, the sun and stars go dim, but when women can't speak, the world breaks, creation torn limb to limb. Women bleed from biting their tongues. Men lead from the time they are young. And men are proud of tradition, and women are bound by permission. And submission is a clever rhyme for a violent act. And misogyny is a violent act for clever men. And neither are seen as unforgivable sins because that label saved for the preaching women. And again, the world breaks and shatters with the din, and God is still silent, and heaven still run by the men.
mhm. So we hope you join us in the second half for a little more poetry and a little more conversation.